That is a remarkably unique segue here on Stribling's New York on WOR AM Radio 710 on your digital dial, iHeartMedia, because we are playing the University of Pennsylvania theme song. I have, unfortunately, was not smart enough to attend UPenn, but I visited there many times, and we are fortunate enough to have a really great guest today with us, Robert Wolf, who not only attended the University of Pennsylvania, but was the starting fullback on their football team there, he's a really unique scholar athlete, former president and chief operating officer of UBS Investment Bank, as well as chairman and CEO of UBS's Group Americas division. And he now runs his own firm, 32 Advisors, picked after his number 32 that he wore at UPenn. And did you wear that, Robert? Welcome at Marblehead also?
I did. It's, when we grew up, you only could buy a few different football jerseys. Jimmy Brown wore 32. My wife doesn't like me to say it. OJ wore 32. So I was a running back, so I picked 32. My brother picked 15. He was Bart Starr. He was a quarterback. I have to change and let you know that is the Penn Fight song, not the theme song.
Sorry.
Us football players, we can't have it the themes. And I have to also let you know, believe me, I wish I was a starting fullback. I am the guy that had to buy the scoreboard to get into the end zone.
Come on. No, well, first of all, there are 6 degrees of separation. You and I have like 1 degree of separation. This is the first time we've actually met face-to-face, but we know one another through Twitter and email, and I've known your sister for over 20 years because Lisa Wolf and I used to work together at World Wrestling Entertainment. Although there will not be any kind of Donnybrook or brawl here, even though I hate to say this on New York radio, but we can mention the Red Sox, the Patriots,
Absolutely.
and of course, the Boston Celtics.
Well, we like to call ourselves the city of champions, right? So over the last decade, I think we're the only city that's won championships in all 4 major sports. But, who's bragging? But
look, I don't look at it as a negative thing. I think it's a great rivalry between Boston and New York because when I was a kid, and there were far few basketball teams in the NBA back then, I'm 60 years old, almost in 2 weeks. And I used to go to almost every Celtic game when they were at the Garden. And one of the great experiences of my life, you can't smoke in restaurants anymore. You used to be able to smoke at Madison Square Garden. And I saw somebody sitting in the center green seats smoking a cigar. It was Red Auerbach. And I went up to him and said, "What do you think of Campy Russell? Isn't he great?" And he goes, "He stinks. He's not going to make it in the NBA." And, of course, he was right.
Well, no question about it. Rivalries are great, and certainly Boston, New York's the best. I know it. I live it every day. When I walk home, my 2 boys and my wife, they are Yankees, Knicks, Jets, Giants fans, so I see it every day.
Well, now we have to drift away from sports, and we're going to talk about this for the entire show. Tell me about 32 Advisors and especially your involvement with drones, which I know very little about, but I'm fascinated by because my former show on WOR was all about the tech industry.
Right. Well, so they're 2 separate companies. 32 Advisors is a cross-border advisory. We focus on really 3 things. We focus on infrastructure projects. We focus on project finance, which is things like satellites, and we focus on economic advisory, and that's run by Austin Goolsbee, who's the former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under the president. And our business is really pure advisory. And then we have a separate business that's no longer part of 32 Advisors. We spun off recently, and that's called Measure, Drone as a Service. And we are the nationwide provider of drone services. Okay, we like to say we don't make drones, we make drones work. And we focus on 4 or 5 various sectors. So we focus on precision agriculture, how to use drones for farmers to make crops, the prices of crops less expensive to produce for them, and therefore it gets passed through to the consumer. We focus on infrastructure, whether it's vertical infrastructure such as cell towers or utility lines or any other aspect of infrastructure, could be stadiums. We focus on property and casualty companies, so what happens post-disaster recovery. Public safety, we're proud to say we did a venture with the American Red Cross on how to use drones for public safety and disaster recovery. And so those are the main sectors, and there's others. You know, we're working right now with one of the largest news service providers, so they can have one-stop shopping where they call our company Measure, and they know that they're going to get a drone provider that's safe, secured, regulated, and insured. So very proud of it. It's a little over a year old. We got the largest FAA exemption in the country. That gave us the ability to fly in all 50 states with over 200 types of UAVs, which is unmanned aerial vehicles or systems, but we call them drones. And so it's been, for me, it's been literally an each and every day education. I'm fortunate to have built the company around incredibly sharp people, including, former people from, the military, TSA, foreign intelligence. I mean, certainly most of the drone professionals have come from the side of Homeland Security and military.
Well,
and so
I have a question about relating to agriculture, because this is what I find so interesting. We're really hearing more wacky stuff like Jeff Bezos saying we're going to deliver stuff for Amazon. Like, oh, here's the new Lee Child book coming in on a drone. But that doesn't really sound like a sensible, viable application. I mean, how are drones really going to affect the economy dramatically? What are you going to do?
Thank you for asking. So I'm not here to, say that what Jeff says at Amazon may not happen, because we've seen actually in many ways what Jeff says usually happens. But that's not the angle we're going after. We actually think the urban delivery environment is not going to be the things that the FAA looks to approve because of privacy and other safety aspects. We think actually delivery could come into place in what you call like last mile, so remote areas, or certainly with disaster recovery, whether you have to deliver certain supplies and things like that. So I would say there are uses of drones for delivery, although I'm not sure they're going to take the place of the post office anytime soon. For us, drones is really an incredibly efficient way to get aerial data. And aerial imagery is what everyone really wants to use. They're using today either satellites, or they use people on helicopters, or they use people in trucks going up and down, whether it's pipeline or utility lines. And drones can do it safer, less expensive, and can get better imagery. They can go up to 2 to 3 meters to centimeters of actually to take the picture. The other things, there are things called payloads, and let me tell you, anything I'm saying, I'm regurgitating from the experts that surround me today. But then there are the payloads, and what are the payloads? What are the things you attach to the drone? So it could be, infrared sensors. It could be things that claw on for packaging, or it could be things that you spray for fertilizer and pesticide. So there are incredible ways to use drones for commercial and industrial practices. We are really the first mover to be the nationwide operator. And, I like to say, I've been fortunate to have a few successes, but this could be the most exciting thing I've ever done, and it's going to be binary. Either we're going to be incredibly successful, or we probably didn't execute as well as we should have.
Well, it just seems like a no-brainer to me. I mean, I just look at it from my pointed skill set and working in television for so many years and in the movies, but having to rent helicopters for aerial photography, which has got, as time progressed, especially post 9/11, just got harder and harder and harder, because you have no fly zones and you need aerial shots. And besides the expensive equipment, you have to hire experts that can shoot it and fly the helicopter and so on and so forth. And it became incredibly expensive. So that's changing the industry in that regard.
Well, Rob, you just did my advertisement for me. Listen, we are believers in regulation. Smart regulation, prudent regulation, but do not kid ourselves. Drones are, like mini planes, and so you have to have command and control centers, and you cannot have, hobbyists flying everywhere.
Well, that was my next question.
So there needs to be real rules of engagement. That's what the FAA is doing, and listen, regulation bodes well for our company Measure, because we want to be the one-stop shopping provider of drone as a service, and we want to be the turnkey solution. And most Fortune 100, 500 companies don't want to have their own drone expertise. They want to outsource it, and we want to be that person that you come to.
So is there eventually going to be like a drone traffic controller job available for people? Because I would think that you're going to have somebody doing something.
Well, let's make no mistake. We are having very strong conversations with both the DOT and the Department of Labor and other areas about, one, how can we, maybe provide jobs for veterans that have this experience. So there may be great opportunities for veterans to work with Measure as we look to build the nationwide operator. Remember, you have to be licensed, and an FAA piloted license. There are a lot of those who are already in the military that could easily transform to become commercial and industrial operators. So, listen, this is going to be a regulated industry, and there's going to be an incredible number of jobs available as the commercial and industrial use of drones mature.
What kind of industry are we talking about dollar-wise? I mean, where could this grow in the next 20 years?
Well, listen, people are using, numbers in the hundreds and hundreds of billions. I would say from, their mouth to God's ears, being, one of the first movers in it. But it's growing, literally each and every day. I think I read a number that there were 1.6 million drones sold in the U.S. in 2015. My guess is, that wasn't 10% in 2014. So it's moving quickly, and you have to really look to differentiate between the hobbyists and the commercial and industrial practices.
Well, I did a previous show, not for this program, but for another one, on a company called Icon Air. So there's a former pilot who's invented a plane. I mean, it's in production now. It's a 2-seater plane, and it's for people like that live in the Midwest. And let's say you're in Wisconsin and you have a hunting cabin somewhere. I think it costs about $250,000. So it's actually less than a boat might cost. And you can get a license for it, actually, frighteningly, pretty quickly. And it can take off, from your backyard, and you can fly it. And the company's doing well, but they did a test like near the Hudson River. And, of course, 20 SWAT teams showed up because they didn't really prep the media or anybody well enough in advance. And it's so technologically it's fascinating what people are coming up with, but I still see drones as the big.
Yeah. Well, last week was the Consumer Electronic Conference, or 2 weeks ago in Vegas, and there are a myriad of genius ideas out there. We're happy that we're focusing on the drone area.
Yeah, I just think that while a lot of this stuff just seems like, wow, this is fun, what a great toy, I can go buy this, that doesn't mean that it's going to be able to be put into actual practice. And I think a lot of these companies have gotten ahead of themselves. I also wanted to talk to you about, another commonality you and I share is we're frequent guests on Fox Business News, although they use me just strictly for political commentary. And you're also on Wall Street Week, our mutual friend Anthony Scaramucci. We can talk about the economy, which is not my area of expertise, but always something that I want to learn about.
Well, thank you. I mean, as you know, my background's 30 years on Wall Street. So, often we get to go on different TV shows to give our opinion. I like to say it's news for a second, but it's nice to be on. I get nice calls from my mom saying, "Hey, I saw you on TV." But listen, this has been an incredibly difficult start to the year. We are not too positive right now where the economy's going. We actually 32 advisors. We hosted our dinner with Austin Goolsbee a week ago, and we had 18 different financial service executives sitting around the table. It's the first time in a while people are now talking recession again.
Are we in official bear market now then?
I wouldn't say bear market. The market's volatile. It's going up and down. So I know Japan has said that they've moved to bear market territory, but I would not say it's the same for the U.S. I would say volatility is here to come. With prices where they are, you'll see some share buybacks coming up. So it could inflate the price of stocks for different reasons. We don't see organic growth. We don't see real profits that we can say wow to. And our biggest concern is right now the Fed. You could argue, we were not positive on them raising rates. We did not have the same outlook on growth, and the strength of the dollar has absolutely crippled the economy over the last few months. And so we're very nervous about it. And, if you take the strength of the dollar and the nervousness on what's going on in the energy sector, right now capital investment is slow. And what we've seen is a rebound over the last 5 years is certainly concerning today. And one of the biggest questions is, when the Fed goes against the grain, meaning all the central banks of the world are in an accommodative stance, and if the Fed is in a rate rising stance, then all of a sudden the U.S. becomes, a bit of the outlier. Now, we can say we've been an outlier with respect to the strength we've shown, but, running at 2.5% GDP growth, no one's ringing the bell and saying, wow.
So where do you see the real estate market being affected anyway by this economy then?
I think all things are going to be, somewhat infected. The real estate certainly won't be impacted like it did in 2007 and 2008 because, partly FICO scores have moved up. So, the end buyer of the home is a better counterparty than where it was back then. Secondly, savings has moved up, and so if someone spends $1, if someone has $1, they're not spending $1.05. So, I think that I think there's nervousness that the rental market has really moved fast and furious, and then you have this intersection: is it cheaper to buy or cheaper to rent, with rents moving up so fast because it's tougher to buy. I also think, balance sheets have come down at banks, especially the regional banks and the larger commercial banks dramatically. So there is not much funding capability for purchases. So, listen, I think we have come back an incredibly long way in the housing market, but, I'm not sure we have much more to go right now.
Now, another thing that you're involved with is the partnership from New York City. You're a board member there?
Yep.
What can you tell me about that?
The partnership for New York City is run by Kathy Wild, and it has, my guess is going to be 100 plus different executives on it. And it's really all the executives of the New York City-based companies, from the Wall Street firms to the retailers, to all the different, to the entrepreneurs, and really we get together for thinking about ways New York City can better itself, whether it's on travel and tourism, whether it's on working with the public sector, whether it's the mayor's office or the governor's office. As I said, it's run by Kathy Wild. She does a superb job making sure that, we find the right intersection between the private and public sector, which obviously has been a bit rocky over the last 5 years. But she's done a great job really navigating it for both sides to work well. It's kind of like almost a chamber of commerce for New York City in some ways, where really they're promoting, what I would say best practices for New York business.
Does New York have a chamber of commerce?
I don't know.
I've always wondered actually what the chamber of commerce does. Okay.
I like the idea of calling it a partnership for New York City.
So. I like that better. Tony Simone, our producer, who has a very storied political background, just told me, yes, we every city has. He just berated me. Every borough has one, even more important. So, which leads me now to another question then, because you are very knowledgeable and an economic advisor to the president. Where are we going infrastructure-wise? We have all these huge jumps technologically, and we're building like crazy in a city like New York. How are we going to catch up infrastructure?
So listen, I think that there are a lot of things we've done well, trying to get out of the recession over the last 7 years. The one thing that you would have been the least polarizing, most bipartisan sector for us all to work on together is infrastructure. The unions are pro-infrastructure. The private sector's pro-infrastructure. Government's pro-infrastructure. There is no one that is not pro-infrastructure. Why? The numbers don't lie. It's the fastest multiplier of GDP growth. For every dollar spent, it's a 1.6 multiplier. And it's the fastest way for jobs. For every billion spent, it's somewhere between 25,000 direct jobs and myriad of more tangential jobs. And we have a D+ by the Civil Engineering's report. And I know that when my kids came home with a D+, they're not going out the next night, week, month. And so we know we're not happy with it. And so if a country is not satisfied and you have trillions of infrastructure needs, and I don't mean just roads and bridges, which we have needs for as well, but I'm talking next generation GPS and electric grids and water treatment centers. We have such incredible needs. Like I said, it's bipartisan in nature. It's one of the first things that the president put out was the creation of a national infrastructure bank. When I was on his President's Economic Recovery Advisory Board, Laura Tyson and I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, the need for a national infrastructure bank. We went through it. We were not alone. There was probably 50 op-eds before, after, and there will be in the future. But at the end of the day, this is a no-brainer. An absolute no-brainer. And I know we're not allowed to talk politics, but
Yeah, well, it has to come in at one point or another, and this is really important. I mean, especially here in New York City. My sister, who's sitting in the studio with us, she and I were driving down the West Side Highway yesterday, and it is remarkable. I mean, the amount of new buildings. And a couple of weeks ago, we did a show here with somebody talking about the Hudson Yards, and there's a tremendous amount of buildings going up. How are people going to get back and forth? How are we going to connect there? We do have the new 7 train, but still.
Listen, in New York City, infrastructure is critical, especially with travel and tourism. So the redesign of LaGuardia is critically important. The idea that we need, more ports so we can make sure that commerce stays strong in New York is more important.
Well, we do have plenty of work to do on roads, bridges, subways, buses, and everything involving the infrastructure, not just in New York City, but across the country. And Robert Wolf is a guy that can tell us even more about that, and I'm sure has many solutions. So we're going to listen to this as a podcast as well, many times over. It will be available on WOR710.com. Besides this broadcast, Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rob. Real pleasure.
We'll have you back again soon. Good night.